Welcome back, folks, to the WP-Tonic Roundtable Show. This is 515th episode. We record this every Friday at 8:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, and you can watch it live on the WP-Tonic Facebook page, and you can leave comments, suggestions, or you can just be nasty to the panel. They're quite used to it. We've got a great panel. I think I've rustled up some interesting stories. I think it's going to be a great show. I'm going to let the panel introduce themselves. I'm going to start with my friend, Sally. Sally, would you like to introduce yourself?
Certainly. My name is Sally Getch. I am the organizer of the East Bay WordPress meetup in Oakland. And yes, and apparently the person who coughs.
Yes, we did get some feedback. Feedback's always welcome now. Steve, would you like to quickly introduce yourself?
Yeah, Steven from zipfish.io. We make WordPress faster by optimizing the server and the code that runs on it.
Speed is the name. Got my friend Uncle Spencer. Uncle Spencer, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, Spencer Foreman from launchflows.com.
Got Vito with us. Vito, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Vito, founder and CEO of WP Feedback, and we have a dashboard that helps WordPress professionals manage their clients and projects.
And we've got a special guest, friend of the show, comes on periodically, always welcome. We've got Brian Jackson. Brian, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, yeah, thanks. Brian Jackson, co-founder at Forge Media. And right now we are working on publishing a lot of content, and we also develop a couple of premium WordPress plugins.
Yes. How are those going, Brian?
It's going good. Fortunately, with all this stuff with COVID and stuff, I think people are sitting at home buying WordPress plugins, I guess. So I guess for us, it hasn't been a bad thing, I guess. So.
That's good news. Right. Before we go into our main stories, I've got to mention our great sponsors that help me keep the show going. Basically, they cover all the costs involved. Yes, folks, there are costs involved in doing a podcast. Our main sponsor is Kinster. They've been sponsoring the show for over 3 years now. Great sponsor, great company, and they provide great hosting. If you've got a client or you're looking for hosting yourself for your WooCommerce website or your learning management course website, you could do a lot worse than going over to Kinster. They use Google Cloud as their platform, but they provide much, much more. Fantastic interface design, fantastic support. What more could you ask for yourself or for your clients? So I suggest you go over, buy one of their plans, and also tell them that you heard about them on the WP-Tonic show. Our next sponsor is a real friend of the show. It's WP Fusion. And what can I say? If you've got a CRM and you need to communicate with it, with your WordPress website, you need WP Fusion. What you can do with WooCommerce, courses, the endless possibilities are pretty endless, and you need to go over to their website, read up what is capable. You can also have a free session with Uncle Spencer, I think, if you want to learn more about it. What more could you ask for? And it's just a fantastic product. And the same thing, if you do buy, and I suggest that you should, do tell them that you heard about them on the WP-Tonic show. So let's go into the first story of today's episode and why accessibility matters for WordPress themes and their users. What did you think of this, Sally?
Well, I'm definitely an advocate of the accessibility, and I don't see why it should be controversial, and yet apparently it is. And it starts out making the point that things that were put in to accommodate particular issues are often useful to people who don't have those particular issues. The example I've heard is the sidewalk cuts at the corner so that there's a ramp down to the curb. Those are meant for wheelchair accessibility, but they're also used by people who are pushing strollers. They're used by people who have those little rolling carts for their groceries, which doesn't happen out here in the suburbs, but is a fairly common sight in cities, especially in Europe. They're used by kids who are skateboarding on the sidewalk, even though they shouldn't be. And it's very rarely that any of these features, like look at all the bars that are showing the subtitles on the, of course, none of us are looking at bars these days, but bars seem inevitably to have TVs in them, inevitably tuned to sports channels, and inevitably with the subtitles on so that people can, follow what's going on. And those subtitles were not put there for the use of bartenders. They were put there for the use of people who are hearing impaired. It's the accessibility accommodations tend to benefit everybody. Accessibility is usually pretty good for your SEO. And I don't know, it should be one of those things that's just like, it's part of what you do when you build a website.
Yeah, but the strange thing is that when you read the article, there's a link. I think it's in the discussion section of the article from 2014, as exactly.
Right. But it's what they're saying is, hey, we had this article about Astra's popularity, and somebody commented to say like, well, it's like, it's not marked for accessibility and nobody seems to care about that. We've been all over the issue when the Domino's lawsuit went to the. Sorry about that. I have failed to.
Oh, well,
failed to mute my phone before we started.
I'll get Spencer on it. Right then, Spencer, what did you think of this article?
First of all, it's good to see an old friend, a former student, and a very talented person. Claire Brother, where did she go there? Claire Brotherton is involved in this, and I think she's working in WordPress directly with Automatic. But the point is, she and a couple of the other people bring up a good point, which is, I think we talked about this last show. Accessibility is not an option like e-commerce is an option. Accessibility is sort of a foundational thing. I personally believe that it shouldn't really be thought of as an accessory, although at the same time, it shouldn't be the default on behavior. There needs to be an on-off switch. For example, for people who have visual disabilities, the colorblind and otherwise kind of things, having all the links underlined is sort of a big deal. They reference it here. I don't really want to have that on by default, but I would like to make it for somebody who has the accessibility option enabled in their browser for that to be on by default. And that's different than, let's say, I have a website that will never sell anything, and therefore I don't need WooCommerce installed. WooCommerce is an option. The ability for somebody who needs to see the link, see underlines, is not an option. And I think that's ironic that there was also that reference to we've been talking about this for 6 long years, and it's still a conversation. Like, honest to God, what the hell are they waiting for here? I mean, WordPress.
Well, I think I know. I'm going to put this to Brian. I think what's happened, Brian, at the same time when this was growing and looked like we can actually do something about it, came out Gutenberg, came out the page builders, and for the past 2-3 years plus, there's just been turmoil. So accessibility just got put on the back burner. What do you reckon, Brian?
I mean, yeah, I think developers have probably always been putting that on the back burner, unfortunately. We actually have an accessibility toggle in all of our plugins that it's just like Stephen was saying, that when you turn it off, it basically allows the screen reader to go then and use the options instead of the toggles that we have for normal people. Now, I'm sure you could find holes in it if you go through and stuff, but like we have a few plugin users that actually use screen readers. And so we've just always kind of developed with that in mind, knowing that these couple users are going to need this option. I think having those users are important because then it kind of just puts your mindset into this should just be how you develop from the get-go. I kind of view it exact same way as I have to eat gluten-free due to a health condition. And so it's the same type of thing. Like if a restaurant doesn't have gluten-free, I'm never going to buy your product. I'm never going to come to your restaurant. And it kind of, I guess you could say, irks me that they don't want to provide any options. So it's the same thing with accessibility. I think, I'm sure it irks a lot of people that want to use your product, but can't because maybe that developer doesn't care. Or like you said, maybe they put accessibility on the back burner. When like everyone else said, it should just be at this point, we should just all be thinking about accessibility from day one. So yeah, it's weird that we're still chatting about this, and yeah, hopefully one day.
Right. I mean, we had all these arguments about responsive design and mobile friendliness, and wine. Now I have to do 4 times as much work designing this theme, and I'm not necessarily going to get paid more for it, and yet it's like people have finally gotten around to the fact that, well, if at least 50% of website visitors are mobile, like no one is going to buy your theme if it's not mobile responsive. No one's going to visit your website if it's not mobile friendly, or at least, no one's going to be able to use it, so they're not going to visit it twice. And that should be, it's pretty much taken as a given these days that if you make a website, it's going to have to be mobile friendly. And so, yes, I know everything is accessible to the kitty. But
the hard thing I think about mobile accessibility too, and I kind of talked about this in the article, is as a developer, knowing what is accessible and what is not. Like there's all these rules that I can try to memorize and remember, but as I'm building it out, like it's something that I don't necessarily see or something that I don't necessarily think about because it's not an issue or a struggle that I have. And trying to put yourself in that mindset takes a lot of work and effort and ongoing work and effort. It's not something that you're just like, I'm just going to start building everything mobile, or I'm just going to start building everything accessibility friendly, right? Mobile friendly is one thing, right? I can pull up my phone, I can look at it, but accessibility, I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of somebody
right. I mean,
else.
there are tools for these things, but of course, ideally, what you want to do is have real people with real disabilities test things. And in a lot of cases in the WordPress environment, especially if you're talking about something that you're putting in the repository for free, it's not like there's a budget to pay for user testing of any kind.
That's the whole thing.
Even with the testing tools, though, I think they're slightly flawed. Just like you can get
the automated tools will help a little bit, but those won't.
Right, exactly. They don't necessarily solve the problem. Just like if you get an emulator to like emulate a phone and you're trying to fix all of your mobile issues via that, like you only get so far. You get pretty close, but you can't get all the way. And then kind of what Spencer was saying earlier, like the whole reason why Astra theme doesn't have the accessibility tag is because they don't want to put underline links in by default, because that's a huge style change. If people would all of a sudden that appears on everybody's website, people will flip out. And like, how do you account for those kind of things? Which is why I think like Spencer's solution would be really interesting if people, I don't know if there's like some sort of button you can click or some sort of thing that you can do to make it as website become accessible or detect those presets in the browser. Kind of like a lot of times in buildings, you have ramps and you have other entrances. And as long as everybody can get to the same entrance to the same place, like that's how you solve the problem. You can't make every staircase a ramp because it just doesn't work from an architectural standpoint or from a geography standpoint.
Right. I mean, there are some flags coming into CSS for things like prefers high contrast and some of those things which can help. There are some WordPress plugins that supposedly help make your site more accessible, and they have again mixed success as with most automated kinds of things.
No, there are some tools that do exactly what Spencer was describing. So I I kind of got into the accessibility game like 8 years ago or so, because they made it a law in Israel when I was still there building websites there. So I had to deal with like double A and triple A and all of that kind of stuff back then. So a lot of solutions started emerging there out of necessity of it being the law, like you see now stuff with privacy policies and stuff. So so there are plugins that started there, but I know them by Israeli developers that are now very big on the repository that do exactly what you're describing, Spencer, and they have like 6-7 years of development into them. One click and all the links get underlines with text decoration. Another click and all of the text becomes black and all of the background becomes white, or the opposite if that's the game, you know. So it goes to this. You need to do some adaptations if you're like highly customizing what you're doing. But even out of the box, it's gonna take you like 85-90% there, which is awesome.
That's great. Let's go on to the next story, and the Wall Street Journal marketing problem. It's a story from Rand Fishkin. What did you think of this one, Vito? What did you think of this story?
I'll skip this one. Actually, I haven't this one specifically.
Spencer, do you want to comment on it?
I like Rand generally. I don't know if he's tired or this article is pointless, but like this was just sort of saying an obvious point in the first second, and then the rest of it was just, he lost me. I think his point was, know the demographic of the print article or the print medium where you're placing it, because white, conservative, male, financially oriented people are the audience of the Wall Street Journal. So don't let the CEO of your company decide to spend money just for gratifying his ego. Done.
Well, he actually said, you know, if you want it for gratifying your ego, fine, but you should admit that and decide whether it's worth spending the money on it. But I mean, this is not a new point. I know a lot of the whole
problem of America right now is like that's what we're trying to get through, is like that kind of CEO mindset is destroying businesses and people's livelihoods.
Yes, unfortunately, there is a lot of that, but that was slightly off this point, which is one that, you know, I know a lot of people in PR have been trying to make this point, because very often, you know, people come to PR companies and they would say, you know, years ago it was like, you know, I want to be on Oprah, I want to be in the New York Times, I want to be in the Wall Street Journal, and that was all the kind of vanity metrics sort of thing. It wouldn't have made nearly as much, you know, had nearly as much positive effect on their business as, you know, getting an article placed in an appropriate trade magazine. And so
I had mixed feelings. I read it last night, second time, and I thought, is this total fluff? And should I just drop it and find something else? But I think it kind of put it back in your memory that there's loads of reasons why people do stuff, and after time it's not very rational, is it? You know,
right. Well, the you know, the breakdown of reasons is good, but I also thought that the comparison of the audience and the engagement was interesting. That particular set of data that I hadn't really thought about so much is like contrasting the content being shared with, you know, the keywords in the content being shared with the keywords of the profiles of the people who were sharing it, and how different they were, you know, how differently they were skewed, and that you needed to, you know, if you really wanted to get something besides the ego gratification out of being covered there, then you would have to make sure you were appealing to the audience. And, you know, very probably if you wanted to get, you know, broader engagement, you would have to be addressing some of the kinds of topics that the keywords were in. But that, yeah, it, you know, it remains the fact that certain things have prestige and are in demand, out of
And
proportion.
basically, Spencer's right. He was stating the obvious. Does any of the other panel?
Well, it doesn't seem to be obvious to these
Yeah,
CEOs.
No, well, it wouldn't be, would it? Does any of the other panel want to say anything, or shall I move on to the next story panel? Move on.
I think the only other interesting thing is that the different strategies that you can use for marketing, like where you have a budget to put something in a place that maybe isn't marketing to your consumer, but is marketing to other CEOs, which you kind of talked about. Like I remember one startup we had this really big meeting with a biz dev of like a Fortune 500 company. And so the company took out a bunch of billboards, right? Like right around his office building. And so he was literally like sitting in his office staring at one of our billboards, like 2 weeks. We just took it out for a month. So it was like 2 weeks before the meeting and then 2 weeks after the meeting. Ended up the meeting didn't go anywhere. But like there's moments in time where like throwing marketing towards like other business people that you're not going to sell anything to them, but you're trying to work a deal or trying to look bigger than you are or something like that makes sense. That's the only other comment I had.
All right, let's go for our break, and when we come back, see that I've done better with some of the other stories. Uncle Spencer's getting a little bit frisky, but there we go. We'll be back in a few moments, folks. We're coming back. That last story went down like a bucket of sick, but there we go. On to the next story. That's all we can do, isn't it? Stop blaming plugin developers for too many WordPress admin notices. Well, I fucking well do, actually.
Yeah, sorry. This was a big load of whining.
Well, I fucking well do blame them because it's getting ridiculous. Some
of you here actually develop plugins and should probably speak to this first.
I put this in because we were having, I think it was last week or the week before, Adrian was vocal about a position. I don't know, Vito, you may have agreed with him on this, and I'm not saying there's a right or wrong, but if you scroll down to the notes with Katie Keith, we had a conversation about whether when you turn on your plugin that's in the repository or the premium version, whether it should redirect you to a specific page to teach the people how to use it. And I went on record of saying, I used the quote, Adrian, if you did that to me, I hate you. Now, I know he does it. I love him to death. But I'm saying the fact is, I have to install or help hundreds of people with their websites. If every single plugin developer redirects their plugin when I activate it to their other page, that's like 200 extra clicks that I'm never going to get back in my life. And this lady, Katie Keith, says my frustration, which is, look, it's a plugin. If your users can't figure out to click the sidebar name of your plugin to get to the help menu without you redirecting me and everybody else, or if you don't want to put in a kill switch that prevents this, you're being just as naughty as Yoast, who puts his Black Friday sale into a non-dismissible banner. It's a douchebaggy move because the whole top of the screen can get busy and I'm bouncing around every time I activate new plugins and the whole thing becomes like a whack-a-mole game. And I think it has to end. Now, what's interesting is that there were some suggestions here about the accessibility, right? Sorry, not the accessibility, about the notifications, like the Barry, I can't say his name, Koij, with the solution from 2015.
Boy.
Why not activate that? I mean, I know I put one of those.
Oh, we know why not, because Jetpack is one of the worst offenders. So it's never going to happen.
We'll talk about Jetpack CRM in a moment, how they made the obvious become true. But so that's my takeaway. Why I recommended this article was, we've reached a saturation point.
Say that again.
I've installed special scripts and plugins that kill all admin notices, even though I need to know about some of them, because some bad actors have hijacked the process.
Can you send them to me? Actually, put them into chat, actually, because I've been trying to find the right combination that can kill this.
Is the admin menu.
There's a free one on GitHub that basically, it's called Toggle Admin Notices.
I'll put it into chat. I call it WordPress weeding. It's like keeping the weeds down. It's just got, well, Brian, what do you reckon?
Tom McFarlane, who's I think referenced in the article. But this
what do you reckon?
I mean, I agree. I view it as how Spencer said. any clicks I shouldn't have to do is just a waste of time, and all those clicks add up to your hours of your day at some point. Like in our plugins, we don't have anything even on the sidebar of the WordPress dashboard, because I hate things that are just taking up space in the dashboard. So like if you want to get to our plugin, you have to go to settings and then to the settings of our plugin. And then, so like,
the sensible thing to do, in other words.
I mean, that's what I think.
It depends.
I think building, I'm in a different position, I think, than Vito might be too. And so I think it depends on where you're at. And I didn't always work on plugins either. So I'm coming at it from more of a user first, and then doing plugins second. And so I just have hated notices like this from the get-go. So when we started making plugins, we just kind of went with what I wanted to do, I guess you could say. But I also think there could be a way better solution. Like that example in the article, like seems like a no-brainer to me if the WordPress community just got together and we got that into core somehow.
Some solution, because this is just got totally
also
out of hand, doesn't it?
To speak on Katie's comment, which is interesting because I use her EDD plugin for VAT stuff, and I actually really like her plugin. Like she does really great work, but stuff like that I think should be left for an onboarding email when they purchase your thing. Like put a link to your documentation on how to get started in the onboarding email, not in the WordPress dashboard. So I think there's different avenues you can put stuff like that for your users rather than always doing it in the dashboard. But that's my opinion.
Now, come on, Vito. Are you going to confess to your crime?
You're all alone, Tom.
Are you going to confess to your crimes? Are you, Vito?
Actually, no, because I'll tell you that we don't even have an option in our plugin to add those notices. Like we opted out even before we
disappointed,
started.
Vito. You could have taken the opportunity to confess.
But.
You know.
But the reason, and I see this, I see this from a user point of view as well. I agree, it's a mess. Like now, even when you go to every website, you have 5, 6, 7, 12 notices if you haven't visited in a couple of days. And I do agree with the title of this article, just that you gotta stop blaming developers for this thing, because there's a very important reason why this is happening.
I do, Vito.
So you can't.
Because let Vito explain the point.
Yeah. The reason why I'm saying this is because developers need to be in touch with their users. This is a very important part of getting your user to understand how to maximize the value out of whatever they have in their hands. No one knows what to do straight out of the gate. So I agree with Brian, some plugins, their place is inside the settings or inside the tools or whatever. But some plugins, they have like a boatload of functionality, and they do need to users need to access them in way more often than they need to access the tools tab, or the permalinks link page in there. So that's the kind of differentiation that I would put in there. With notices, I think it's WordPress's fault. So there is no facility to actually do this properly. And developers are desperate to train their users as well as to get their rankings up by asking for reviews and all this kind of stuff, because of what you said, Jonathan. There's like a huge saturation in the market, so you're fighting for these reviews to get higher on the repo over there, and that comes at the expense of the user. A few things that I think could be done pretty fast. First of all, when it comes to those reviews, everyone wants reviews. There is no plugin developer that doesn't want his plugin reviewed. So start from that understanding, and maybe once a month, give like a Tinder kind of function that pops up and tells you, what do you think? You want to review this one, review this one, review this one, and just go through your 15 plugins that you have in there, or those that you didn't review. Done. No one needs to bother you or your clients, which is the more important thing. And then when it comes to those notifications, I do think that WordPress needs to add an ability for developers to extract either an email or to add a box that is prominent that will tell people that things have been updated, that there is a security problem, that because of their update, they might need to look into some of the other plugins that they have in there, or maybe just because this plugin created the next best thing after sliced bread, you know, so his users needs to know about this. Yeah, so I put the blame on WordPress instead of on the developers, because it's a very easy problem to fix, and it is a problem.
I think Vito's point is really good.
Sorry, Stephen, go ahead.
I was just saying, I think Vito's point is really good that like, I feel like before I read this article, I was getting frustrated at plugin developers, but after like thinking through how the notification is set up, when WordPress only gives WordPress developers, like plugin developers, one avenue for putting out notifications, and that avenue is a really annoying avenue, then maybe there should be another solution, and we need to figure out a better way to handle those notifications. And if it's not the plugin developers, that the way that the only route is annoying to users. Like that's more of a
yeah. That's
and
I
you
think
see
that
people
was
that
was
are-
a very good point. That that WordPress needs to facilitate a way to create less annoying notices. At the same time, I do think there was a little whining in this article because you have to assume that people have lots of plugins installed, and that those plugins are probably also going to pop up notices. I mean, when I was in high school, we'd all kind of complain, oh, all of our teachers act like this is the only class we're taking, and they give us all this homework and expect blah, 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 blah. And, it said something about, statistically, there was an average of 15 plugins. I rarely build a site with that few plugins on it.
Sure.
And
because they're considering a lot of those local sites where it's just left empty, and that kind of changes the statistics. But 16 plugins is you install a Gravity form and it comes with 15 already.
Yeah, WooCommerce. Look at you can use WooCommerce. Oh my God, it's like there we go. Any of it, right? Yeah, right.
I think that's.
Go on, Brian.
I think it stems on a bigger problem, though. Like, if you think about it, it's the whole UI in WordPress is a problem at the moment.
Yeah.
I think WP Tavern just had an article the other day about like how plugin developers can do their UI. It's like a whole plugin just to redo the UI of WordPress, essentially, because all these plugins.
I saw that. I haven't tried it out yet.
Yeah, all these plugins have their own UIs, which is so frustrating, even for the user, because then you have to learn a whole new UI just to use that plugin in the dashboard, where we have to have some uniform type of thing where developers just have to follow these things these are the buttons you can use. These are the things you can use. And so it'd be way better for the user. Otherwise, that's how like Shopify and Wix, that's how they're getting people and are succeeding, because when you get into those products, it's just beautiful from step one to all the way through. And when you get into WordPress, it's like, this is just a mess.
And I agree. I think that to comment on what Spencer said, we do have this, after you activate the plugin, it takes you to a wizard. You can skip it if you want, but we control the experience because we don't, I've been using WordPress for more than 10 years, and I know that there is a better way of doing the flow than throwing the person back to the plugin screen where we need them to activate a license, or we need them to go through a set of steps to actually get to that aha moment or to the realization of what needs to happen there. Right. So that's your point. You can click the skip. Just click the skip.
I disagree on a fundamental proposition.
Wait, but that's not one of my points. Sorry, Spencer. My point is actually about what Brian said, continuing on this with the fact that every plugin developer creates their own UI. And it is exactly for that reason, because you look at what WordPress supplies by default, which is trying to be like a kind of a vanilla kind of, one thing fits all. But it's just, it's not up to par with what's going on in the market. And if you want your product to stand out, you got to do your own thing. So we don't regard the WordPress style at all. We have everything written from scratch with when it comes to the dashboard screens that we're using, and it matches our dashboard. It matches our branding on the thing. So there is a uniform experience from our point of view as they are using the feedback tool. But But if there was something that is a lot more, modern, or just looks nice, or even a few options to make it look like it's 2020 and not 2004 anymore, then maybe we would consider.
Go on, Spencer.
The fundamental problem here is that, and it ties into the styling thing. When I, again, built the last plugin, Launch Flows, I had to go and see if anything had changed. And I ended up referring to articles from like Justin Tedlock and folks from 5-6 years ago on what are the UI component references to use, the classes and the other library. There is not something top-level developer that's agreed upon. So fundamentally, we're dealing with like 2000, year 2000 and something generation style manuals and style components when everybody else is in the like jet age here of using page builders. So for you and other companies, first of all, the dashboard itself, wherever you find it, you have a choice. You go like I did, which is like, I only have a few choices. So fine, I'll stick with it's 1999 and it's black and white and red all over. You've got this amazing thing. And I know Groundhog has this amazing thing. So having a tool set that's available for everybody to use to make it more of a Shopify experience would definitely benefit the ecosystem, because I could just drag and drop a cool dashboard and not have to invent it from scratch. Just like I used Appsero to do my automatic updates for the plugin instead of writing that, like roll my own. It was just a pleasure. Secondly, the bigger problem, which is where I'm not beating you up, but I'm just saying there's a difference of distinction, is it's like the people that hoarded toilet paper at the beginning of the pandemic. With WordPress saying to developers, you're on your own to do anything you want, and here's a few ways to get attention. You can flash all this stuff on the top of the thing and not make it dismissible, or worse, make the cardinal sin of not putting a unique class into your notice so that somebody like me could turn it off specifically with CSS. That's the worst ones, where it's like a generic notice and you can't turn it off, or you have to. Or the next choice is you can be like MySpace and you can make your name in the left-hand side of the dashboard like pink and purple polka dots with flashing letters and stuff and get attention that way, like some plugin authors do. Or you be a douchebag and you hijack the onboarding experience so that when somebody turns on your plugin, in order to get attention, you take me away from where I want to be to put you where you should have been able to go on your own, which was, I 100% agree that you and Groundhog and everybody else should be able to do on your home page of your link, here is the thing to do first. But don't make me go there just because I turned on your plugin, because that's just as bad as doing this or doing this.
I've got it.
I'm sufficiently annoyed with getting a little freemium notice every time I have to, deactivate something to troubleshoot. It's like, will you quit interfering with it? Because
I got to tell you, Vito,
that it's the first time someone has installed
I got to tell you,
plugin.
Vito, I love the product, but the onboarding experience, I find it extremely irritating.
How many times do I need to learn your onboarding when I've done it 100 times?
Yes, if you've done it 100 times, that's true. We don't know.
You're alienating your fanboy.
I mean, if you do have a skip button, you are ahead of some people.
Right. Well, we do have a skip button, but it is like a 3-step process that people need to go through in order to actually use the base of it.
Here's where you guys are going with it. Have you tried the latest version of WooCommerce? I think I froze up.
No, not yet.
The latest version of WooCommerce has become militantly obnoxious.
I'll say that again.
You literally cannot escape the gauntlet. It is like going to GoDaddy and buying, although I do, going through GoDaddy purchase. If you start the WooCommerce...
Is there a plugin to stop it?
Yeah, you can stop it by using a thing that's, I'll give you the link. There's a thing that says...
thank God, I was trying to find that yesterday.
Below WooCommerce. But it's reached the point of like, Vito, you have 20, 30 plugins. Every one of them is now like the toilet paper hoarder. I'm going to take all the toilet paper. I'm going to take all the toilet paper. I'm going to take your attention. I'm going to take your attention. Where does
we already have your attention. You just installed that plugin.
I don't want to give you more.
But you could be installing a dozen plugins.
I'm saying you only install one. You can't install a dozen plugins.
Come on, you look. You've gone through WooCommerce. I know how to install and set up WooCommerce. I don't want the new experience they gave me. I was okay with the old one where you could just say skip, 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 skip.
Right.
But like this one is like you're in, you can't get out until you finish it.
Yeah.
I don't want it where every plugin is now competing. Oh, look at those guys over there. They've got that onboarding, and I'm going to do that with my plugin.
Yeah, the only other thing.
Why do you think there is this competition? There is a competition there. It's just a flow. Someone installs it, and what is the next step? That's the way I see it. It's not disrupting attention. It's not grabbing your attention while you are doing something else.
It is a little bit.
It is
It's a
grabbing
little
my
bit,
attention.
Vito. I'm sorry.
Maybe.
And your
your
plugin is a lovely plugin, and it's really easy to use. If you can't work out how to use your plugin, you've got to be pretty, to some extent, a bit brain.
I just don't understand, like, name there.
Just to jump into Vito's defense a little bit, there's nothing more annoying than having a plugin and getting the same questions in support over and over and over again.
Where's the second page?
Because no one's actually doing any search to how to set it up.
Have to happen though. When you get your plugin installed and they go to your plugin name the first time, that is where they see your onboarding and they get taught what to do.
Now, in their defense, not everybody will go and assume that there must be settings for the
They
plugin.
will not. They will not. I know for a fact they will not.
I don't understand anything what you guys are saying. When you put the plugin in the dashboard is the name of the plugin. To use the plugin, you look for the name of the plugin and you click the name once and it tells you everything else. And from there you do your whole onboarding.
Spencer, have you really never met somebody who assumed I installed it? It must be doing everything else by itself?
Right. Brian, how many times did you get support requests, people saying, where is the settings screen? And tell them inside the settings.
No, I think there's a big distinction here. There's users and then there's us. We're not this normal user. The normal user, I've had people install our Perf Matters plugin, which is usually used by more tech savvy people, and they think it's just running and everything's good, and they didn't do anything. And then I have to tell them, no, you need to go into the settings, and then you go, because I don't have an onboarding experience.
But you're doing this after the first experience was already ruined in their mind.
Exactly, yeah. So I think there's
talking about a settings
people.
menu. I'm not talking about that, Brian. I mean, your point is well taken. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the logic exists to write into your plugin, just like you would with a notice that's dismissible, that the one thing, just one thing your users have to know is when you put the plugin in, click our name in the left side in order to go through this setup thing, instead of it just taking me away from the plugin install part. That's my entire point. And if you can't get a buyer to understand, click our name one time, then there's no hope for this person anyway, and you're alienating the rest of the customers who, I mean, seriously, it's like in the store.
I would rather see a notice that says, go to the settings to finish this, than be taken automatically to the settings page that minute.
Right. I would prefer not to have any notices at all and just walk through the process that I'm doing, finish that up. I install Gravity Forms. It's going to take me to put in my license. I install Toolset. It's going to ask me to put in the license.
Take you to put your license in. You can dismiss
Gravity Forms, yes. Take it directly.
The Gravity Forms thing, again, they have a one trick about it. I'll admit, I used to talk about this all the time. With Gravity Forms with the license, they do have this thing that is a bit like GoDaddy where people get panicked if they don't put their license in. They don't realize you don't have to. I used to have to teach people to ignore it. I grant you that. That's equally bad, but it works for their particular thing. It's been around a while. But either way, what I'm saying is with so many people vying for attention, we are going down into the tubes with the WordPress user experience in general, because now the whole experience for the end user and the people who help them is about deactivating or blocking or hiding all the shenanigans of people trying to steal attention. And it's gotten out of control. It's like Flash in 1997 or something, like 30 minutes to load a web page with all the banners. That's where we're at. And how could that be good for any plugin developer? Because, hey man, yours is cool, but mine's bigger and flashier. And I hijack the people here and there and the other, and everybody starts being a bad actor. And it's only up to us as the developers to do something about it, which is, I mean, just come up with a truce. We put in our plugins, and people have to be told the first thing you do with any plugin is click on the name once or something.
Yeah,
Whatever. I mean, I'm not picking on you, Vito. You're not the only one doing
No,
it.
I'm just, it's an interesting, I know, I didn't invent this. I'm doing it because I liked it happening on other plugins. But I never looked at it from this angle. It's interesting.
Rightio. On to the next story. Higher ed, enough already. And that's from Professor Scott Galloway. Yeah, he's been rampant in his criticism of American education. What did you think of this one, Brian? You did read it, Brian, did you?
I did. I skimmed it a couple times because I thought it was interesting. I went to a private university myself.
You didn't, did you? Oh, you did. So it's on your thing, isn't it?
I did. And
you paid back all the loan, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, it cost $35K a year when I went, times by 4 years. I mean, it's ridiculous. If I had to go redo everything in my life, I would not have gone to a private university. But something I can't take back. But I agree that I think the gist of his article was we have to get moving forward at some point, and there's going to be, I think, a hybrid approach no matter what. I know here in Arizona, they just announced yesterday, like, school is starting, and we're going to allow the schools to do, a hybrid approach. We're creating a framework for you. So if you want to do online classes first, that works, and then get to the in-person later. So they're allowing the schools to kind of make up their own minds, which I think is kind of clever, because I think when it comes to whatever your views are on the COVID stuff, and, wearing masks and all that stuff, it allows you to at least make your decision based on your local area, at least, and appease those people, because Northern Arizona is a lot different than, here where I'm at. So it allows the schools to kind of make up their own mind.
He uses I thought my vocabulary was reasonably good, but I had to start getting my dictionary out and checking some of these words. Maybe I've been reading too much dumbed down web content, so my vocabulary's been destroyed or something. But you use some words I haven't heard of before. But I didn't go to a private college like you, Brian, did I?
Well, I don't think I have a good vocabulary either. I went to a private college. So, but I mean, they said in here, like, NYU costs almost $80,000. Like, that is just crazy. That is ridiculous.
How are they conning these people? This is what,
Crazy.
And that's like while you're having to pay for rent. Some of it has been
that the more financial aid, it's this kind of ironic thing. The more financial aid opportunities and loan opportunities, et cetera, there are, the fewer people who are actually, paying cash. And therefore, it's not the student at the moment they're attending that pays this. Although, one of the big issues is that even the public universities get paid full tuition by people who are coming from out of the country. And, if they're working, if they're working virtually and they don't have the overseas component, that's going to hurt. This same columnist did a quadrant diagram of who he thought would survive, having to operate on lower revenues due to online classes, and who he did not think would survive. I went to an Ivy League school. It costs stupid amount of money. The amount was comparatively less stupid at the time I was there. I was fortunate enough to have Dad Ex Machina to pay for it and not worry about loans. I didn't realize how big a deal that was until I made friends who had all these student loans and were working 3 jobs and graduating in debt. But I think, it does not seem to make sense to gather large groups of students together in situations where you don't have to. And it's a pity, because part of the benefit of going to college is all the stuff that happens when you're not in classes, being together with other people and the connections that you make and so on. I mean, I obviously wasted my time getting an education and hanging out with people I liked instead of...
I'm sure it's fantastic at a certain price level. I'm going to throw it over to Spencer, but I just want to put this to you, Spencer. The reason why I've come back to this subject is that I actually think I do agree with Professor Scott that there's going to be a dramatic implosion in education in the next few years. And I think WordPress and learning management systems and WordPress in general is going to have a major part in this revolution. But it's had a very checkered, because we've already had the private sector try and change private education, Phoenix University and a number of other private universities, and they've been highly criticised by their practices, worse than state colleges or public sector colleges. How do you see this working out, Spencer?
Well, I want to first address the idea that some people keep saying that the results of people not going back to college is worse than the risk of them getting everybody sick, such as depression and suicide. And that is the biggest load of bullshit ever, because A, there's no actual facts or statistical, historical, otherwise on this subject. So it's pure speculation. But B, has anybody who writes that actually met a teenager or a college student? These are people who don't want to talk in person unless they're drinking and having sex. Every other thing they communicate is virtual through their phones or online. I have 3 teenagers or young adults here, and I have all my friends have same.
If they could text to you, they wouldn't they?
Yeah, you could be in the same room and they will text you to your face. So that is just ridiculous. Do they want to go and hang out with their friends and party and have sex? Yes, that's why they want to go back to school. However, those of us who lived through the 70s and 80s and so on remember that there are limits to what you can do when there's certain things running around in the community. And one of the things that is true is that the people who would support the real universities, the janitors and the people that run the facilities, they're adults, older people. You can't have a bunch of carriers getting on airplanes, running around having sex and partying like they don't care because they're teenagers and young adults, and creating this massive problem of recirculation. You just can't. So that's the immediate problem. The solution that I see is that if we stop playing politics or pretending like this isn't here for real, let's just let the kids have a gap year or let them do online, just like my kids are, and they'll be fine.
Yeah.
The net result, though, in answering your question, is the genie is out of the bottle. There will be no way for these universities to continue justifying the Bush-era shell game that was created, borrow hundreds of thousands of dollars to go to your community college because the universities can compete against each other claiming there's all these benefits. We know now there's no benefits. I mean, the same actual education you get at this or that or the other is equal from online and in person. The only thing that you can say is the prestige of, I have a degree from Harvard, or that I met Bob or Sally or Sue or Fred or anything at Harvard. But those things are going to happen in a different way now. They're going to happen through different kinds of networks. The schools are going to have to stop charging because they're not going to get people who will pay it. The parents like me, I'm not going to send my kid to a $300,000 or $400,000 investment for some cockamamie thing that, is like half baked. I'll let them take the online class.
Over to you, Vito.
So I'm thinking that there's always going to be parents that will pay this, because we're looking at this from the point of view of entrepreneurs, and we know that the game is rigged and it doesn't matter. But people that grow up in the in the standard kind of education system and don't figure out that there's another way, still see this as the path that you got to go there. And if you can go to Harvard, then this means that you nailed it, right? Even though you go out with a debt of $200K at 21. So there's always going to be people that will do that. What I will I'm going to hope that this will help people realize is that out of this 30, 40K a year that these kids are paying, basically 30K goes to the fact that you can party with other friends your age. So you're basically paying 30K to hang out with people your age, because the rest you can get for 10K
you're paying 30K to hang out with smart people your age.
More than that.
Or not, depends well. And I would argue that I met a lot of smart. I never went to uni, and I consider myself rather smart and I hang out with pretty smart people.
My husband never went to university either. It does not affect your native intelligence. However, it would have been really tough for me to stay in my, little Midwestern Ohio town and find like-minded people to hang out with in the mid 80s. It's much easier, now that we have this online world, for people to find other people that they have common interests with.
My point is that this is where the money goes, and people just need to realize that you think you're paying for education, but the education part of it is the $7 grand, $10 grand a year or so that you can.
Trust me, that money is not going to the faculty. I worked at universities.
I want to put this over to Stephen. Now, I've also put a link, and I've mentioned it before, about the Open University in the UK, which probably Vito knows about as well. Yeah. And it's a hybrid system where you have distance learning, Stephen, and then on the more technical, like you can learn chemistry on the Open University, but then in the summer where the traditional university is closed, they rent the lab facilities of universities, and then students can have intense summer, like 5 weeks of chemistry in the labs and it's intense.
That I did do. That is interesting. And the price is reasonable, because you're paying just for the education, not for the social experience that comes around with it.
But I think they're going to replace it, like Airbnb disrupted that model, or Uber disrupted you can very easily see a disruption model where the social aspects of being with like-minded college-age people will exist without you having to pay the ridiculous 100 times its real value to hang out. Exactly. These campuses and these buildings will still be there. I can envision a world where you have a patronage system that the people that made their millions give money to the universities to keep them running, but they open them up as just sort of like places for the kids to do all their other stuff. And they probably will make a fortune on the sports anyway, but that the education part becomes either free or very little of the cost. And because the kids will all be hanging out there and doing the other stuff, then all these other businesses will continue to thrive in the university environment, but they won't be giving this bullshit that we're charging you $60,000 a year for the degree, because that's just not what you're buying. You're buying.
What do you reckon, Stephen?
I don't know. There's ways to get a college education really cheaply. There's ways to pay obscene amounts of money for college education. And there's different values to each person. I think some people who go to Harvard benefit immensely from those connections that get built there. Some of my friends have become insanely successful in their careers based on just the fact that, they were smart people too, but just based on the fact that they were at the right school with the right group of people.
Well, this is the cliche about startups in Silicon Valley, right? It's like all of the founders hire the people they were at Stanford with.
Right. And that's worth millions of dollars. Like if you want to get into that club and you have to pay $1 million, for some people, it's well worth that. And for some people, that's an extremely cheap ticket to be able to have a seat at these tables. Other people, it doesn't make sense at all. And I think that people have a tendency to get mad at the college prices, but people are choosing to pay those, and you don't have to choose to pay those. And the amount of people that will accept people who do not have college degrees and give them meaningful jobs today is increasing, and there's not the stigma there was anymore. So I don't know. I personally think complaining about college prices is kind of a mundane point, because there's enough cheap colleges, there's expensive colleges, there's pros and cons to both. If you feel like paying $300,000 for your education is worth meeting the other people at Harvard and getting those connections, it's probably worth it. And other times it's not worth it at all. So it's such
I think you need to be clear on your goal and on what you're getting, because if what you want is to know how to do something, you don't have to pay that kind of money to learn a skill.
I think we'll move on to the next, because I would like to discuss this. I'm going to drop 6 and we go into our but I'd like to quickly discuss 5.
Zero BS one.
Zero BS CRM rebrands and relaunches as Jetpack CRM. What do you reckon, Spencer?
I feel like has anybody used this?
Huh?
Has anybody used this? I was just curious.
I did a review of Zero BS through BS CRM while I was at Kinsta, like a deep dive. So I actually installed their plugin and went through all the stuff. I haven't used it since they rebranded, but I am familiar. I've talked with Stott and I'm familiar with him. And so, yeah, I found this interesting.
So what's your reflection on it, Brian?
I don't know what I think about this, actually, honestly. I always thought the name was a little hilarious. And then when Automatic acquired it, I thought they did a lot of work in it. Like if you install the plugin, like there's a lot of work that has been done in it.
Do they auto redirect you to a setup?
Come on, Brian. Come on, get to the nitty gritty, Brian.
Remembering back, I think there was a lot of auto redirection. But I think my problem with it is, and nothing against, I know there's some other people that are normally on here that do CRMs and stuff like that, but I just don't ever like putting things like this into WordPress myself. So personally, I don't like, if I was going to use a CRM, I wouldn't use WordPress. I'd use something else. But so I've never been a fan of using WordPress for everything, I guess you could say. And the more I use WordPress these days, the more I hate WordPress, if that's doesn't about bad. But there's just little nitpicky things that, yeah, it's interesting. So, but I think time will tell if Jetpack
you've got to give us a little bit more. Why would you use WordPress as a CRM?
To make an absolute, Brian, because remember, we haven't forgot about the WooCommerce promise. So yeah. I have people hanging out around your screen waiting for you to use that.
We're waiting for me to install WooCommerce. That will never happen. I will never use WooCommerce. Unfortunately, I do have to use it when I'm dealing with clients, but I never use it myself. But yeah, the CRM thing is weird. I honestly don't know if Jetpack made a wise move or not. I think there are a lot of people that will use it because a lot of people do use WordPress for everything. Like I think people want to bundle everything together and make their lives easier. I don't like personally doing that on some things. So this one is just, I've kind of looked at it and read it and said like, I hope it works for him, but I'm not going to use it.
Right, fair enough. Vito, what did you think of it?
I think that, well, it's part of the game that Jetpack is playing, which I think is the right approach for them. Basically, just having a bit of everything, just a little bit of everything. Yeah, and that's a smart move, you know, knowing the fact that they already have the market share. They're just serving them and adding value to the product so people keep using it. This was, you know, like when they bought it, it was obvious that something like this is going to happen. Obviously, the Automatic is not going to maintain a plugin that's called Zero BS.
I would have thought so.
Yeah. So I had a feeling that it's going to find its way into one of their products, which is totally fine. They made an acquisition. The developer is happy. They are happy. It seems like there is potential with HubSpot with more than 100,000 installs on there. Adrian is doing very well with his CRM solution. So people are interested in doing this.
Yeah, but I do understand Brian's. I
I agree. For me, I agree, but yeah, I wouldn't do it myself, but I get it. I get why people do that. And I do think that it is the right approach. It's just that WordPress is like 20 years old when it comes to managing the data. So it's not smart move technologically, but from a user standpoint, if this is your website where you're acquiring the leads, why would I push it out logically? It should be managed from there. It's just not designed for this. Hopefully, this will kick Automatic in the right direction to actually make sure that things are happening a little smarter in there. That brings me to an interesting point about a new plugin that I'll actually make this my recommendation, so I'll shut up.
You know, they're charging $650 up front, and it's just part of the Trojan horse. So this just demonstrates, again, the capabilities of the developers unmatched. I mean, WooCommerce is a core of what I do for business, but when you talk to the core team about why tools are developed internally in WooCommerce or not, you're like talking to aliens from another planet. They don't understand marketing or what the plugin is for. Here, they've taken a relatively solid competitor to Groundhog, absconded it, and jammed it into a force it down your throat for $650 a year, take it or leave it product. They clearly do not understand who the hell it is that's going to use this, because the people that are going to use it are going to be agencies or people that are intermediaries helping their customers with marketing automation. And how do I justify having to pay $650 and then getting like the notes?
The comments, that's exactly what the comment section, that was exactly.
Well, I mean, you know, I was convinced when we talked about the acquisition that basically, this was going to become 100% BS CRM.
That's a good name for it.
Well, we interviewed Bridget yesterday with it, and she was quite frank with when she was lead of marketing, when she actually had discussions with Matt Mohay. That, you know, he lives in a bubble. He actually does believe that Jetpack drives the growth of WordPress. He honestly,
I've heard him say it before. I mean, it is a peculiar sort of
really?
delusion.
And she said he really believes that because it suits him to really believe it, because she said he's a billionaire. You know, he's an enormously wealthy individual who likes yes people around him that agree with him all the time, which I personally would find people that do that to me, I normally sack them because I find it rather annoying because I want them to argue with me, but maybe that's just me.
Well, usually, you know, half of what you're paying a consultant for when you pay them a lot of money is to be willing to argue with you because your employees won't.
Exactly. But there we go. So let's go on to our recommendation. My recommendation is a YouTube channel. If I can find my notes, I'll be even better off. And it's John Wilford, and he will be joining us next week. John has a great YouTube channel where he covers all called Income John from Income Mesh. He covers all technology, a lot of WordPress, but other systems as well, which will be unnamed. But he does a fantastic job of his education. And if you're into WordPress and you want to know the latest products and training, I suggest you go over to his YouTube channel and subscribe to it. Sally, have you got anything you want to recommend to the listeners and viewers?
Yes. In the course of our discussion about admin notices and clutter in the WordPress admin, this is not a new plugin, but it remains a useful one. It's called Admin Menu Editor. There's a free version and a pro version. I've only used the free version, and it lets you organize that sidebar menu.
Alphabetically.
I have the pro, and you can also hide notices.
In the pro, you can hide notices.
Yes.
I mean, the free one doesn't do the hiding notices, but it does help, because I do usually have, you know, external plugins and custom post types, and you know, it gets crowded and confusing, and just to be able to group things in a reasonable way and move some things to submenus and decide, like, you know, I think the pro version lets you say, hey, for this level of user, you know, show
even for particular user, just for this guy, show him this thing. You can hide stuff from the plugin screen even, so you can only show the plugins that you want them to actually be able to turn on and off. Very, very in-depth. We add it in the agency with our care plans. Every client of the care plans has this.
I put it on just about every site that I build.
Oh, that's great. Thanks for that, Sally. Uncle Spencer, got anything you want to recommend to the listeners and viewers?
Yeah. In addition to the Tom McFarlane's GitHub plugin for toggle admin notices, which will hide all that nonsense, the new one is, I promised I would say it last week, I forgot. It's triplechecker.com. This I stumbled upon. They sent me a rare...
They keep nagging me about one of the sites I
want to say this. It is rare that I actually get a spam email that causes me to stop, look, listen, and then contact. This one actually succeeded. Here's why. They sent a sort of one of those, oh, your blankety blank website has whatever. But what their product does is brilliantly necessary for anybody who's finishing up a project for themselves or a client. it just tells you got stupid, silly grammatical errors or a broken link or something, especially the grammatical errors, because there's nothing worse than launching a marketing website where you've spelled a common word wrong. So I talked to one of the founders, or I don't know if she's the founder, but Tracy Chapman. I promised I would talk about this. They had only had it by a subscription service. I said, you guys are out of your mind. Make it a one-time deal. So they made a special product just for me. So I'm getting nothing for this. They said it's $25 to just use it once. I said, this is perfect for somebody who's just launched their full-blown marketing site, just to do a last check automatically and tell me where all the things are to fix. And it probably relates a lot to what Vito's product does, but this is like a one-shot kind of a deal, not like a feedback tool. So give it a try, and you can let Tracy or whomever know that you heard about it on the show here. But the point was, this was useful for free, just like as a, hey, I don't want to look silly. So.
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, my only objection was like, I do not have time right now to like write a review or post about it. It's like, it looks like a useful tool. I'll probably come back to it. But yeah, I was, I think she caught me in the middle of being, sick for weeks. It was like,
yeah, sure.
No, not touching this.
Yeah, sure. Over to Brian. Looks shocked every time he comes on this show. He always looks shocked.
I think that's Brian's resting face.
I can always tell he thinks, why the hell am I on this? But he comes back, and then he forgets how bad it is. And then I say, can you come on the show? And he comes back again. Brian, have you got anything?
I was deep in thought reading the Triple Checker website. It's an interesting product. But no, I was just doing a major content audit on one of my sites. Like, I literally trashed and redirected, like literally, I think as of today, it was like 200 posts. And so obviously with that, I was trying to get the size of the site down. And when you trash posts, unless you go delete all the images manually, they're just going to be sitting in the media library. So there's a plugin called Media Cleaner, which I'd seen before, but I never actually personally used it. And it cleaned up like 600 megabytes worth of just files sitting there in the media library being unused from this old content. So, and it was, you have to be a little careful, like take a backup if you use that plugin first.
Yeah, I've used that one, and there's one I haven't used called something like DX attached media, but where if you delete the post, it deletes the media for the post.
I'll check that out too.
Yeah, I have it. Let me see if I can find the link.
Yeah, make sure that's in the show notes.
Yeah, no, that's. I think a lot of people forget to do that, and so that came in really handy for me. But yeah, if you delete it on the deletion of the post, that'd be amazing.
Right, Stephen, have you got anything you want to recommend to the listeners and viewers?
Yeah, I'll recommend 2 different camera utilities if you want to upgrade your webcam.
Right.
So Canon released a pretty cool EOS webcam utility that allows you to connect your camera to a webcam. It only works in Chrome via browser kind of based stuff, so it's a little bit limited. And the cameras that they support are really limited too because it's still in beta. But all you need is a USB cable from your camera to your computer, so you don't need a capture card. And then the other one is a third-party kind of app. I think it's only for Mac right now. But it works really seamlessly, kind of the same thing, but supports a much wider range of cameras. And you don't need a capture card for it either. The one downside is I think both of those do not support audio. So you have to plug in a external audio source, which is a little bit of a bummer, but it's still a way that you can get around a capture card if you don't have one sitting around or if your camera doesn't work with one.
I bought a camera, which Spencer knows I've been messing around. It's one of the things I've got to get set up. Make sure the links are in chat, can you, Stephen? Vito, got anything you want to recommend to listeners and viewers?
Yes, so we're talking about this... what is it? Bullshit CRM? What was the? No bullshit. No bullshit CRM.
It's a fantastic name. It's a fantastic name, isn't it?
Yeah. So actually, it's a great name. I like the name. But the point was that people install this kind of stuff on their websites, and the WordPress database is not designed for accommodating this type of information or pulling out this kind of information. But there is a solution now called Fortress DB. Which is what I shared here. And this is by Rich. I think you know Rich. He used to have MindDoodle. that made a bit of an impact recently until they closed up, and this is his new kind of thing. What he's doing is going around looking for plugins or solutions that are out there that are using saving entries inside the WordPress database, but they're saving like information that is sensitive in nature, that requires a bit more security. And an added effect to this, or another result of this, is extreme speed, because it's all done via API calls rather than calling a database. So there is a demo on this website that allows you to see how fast they can pull like 1 million rows. And imagine loading, your pages on the admin side, your pages admin screen that has 1 million pages on it, and how long that would take, or if it would even happen. But here there's like a quick demo that shows you how they're doing it with 1 million, literally in 1 second, it just pops. So I definitely think that this is a great way of where our ecosystem is going to, just trying to manage this data properly, as more and more websites needing to use tools to clean out 600 megabytes, because we're using the solution, that we're using WordPress so much, then we're just accumulating data on there. And also from the point of view of security, what are you doing? If you have a CRM, or if you have a forms plugin, what are you actually doing to make sure that all of these records are being managed securely on your website, on your database, that is rather easy to go into, compared to other platforms that are out there. Anyway, look out for Fortress DB. They already have a few integrations with some forms solutions out there, and I can see that this is going to be more and more stuff.
Well, thanks so much for that. Right, I'm going to let you tell people how people can find you. It's been a bit of a long show, but I think we've covered some interesting stuff. Sally, how can people find more about you and what you're up to?
You can follow me on Instagram or Twitter. I am at Sally Getch. My website is WPFangirl.com, but even I haven't visited it lately. And you can find me here now and again.
That's great. Always welcome. Thanks, Sally. Spencer, how can people find out more about you and what you're up to?
Over at launchflows.com, or our free Facebook group, Launchflows.
And Brian, how can people find out more about you and what you're up to?
You can find me over at forgemedia.io, or I always say I live on Twitter, so at Brian Lee Jackson with 2 E's.
That's great. And Stephen, how can people find out more about you and what you're up to?
You can find more about us at zipfish.io.
The speed kings of WordPress. There we go. Vito, poor old Vito. He had a bit of a bruising, but he don't care. Vito, how can people find out more about you and what you're up to?
Look for wpfeedback.co, or reach out to me on Twitter, Vito Peleg, and happy to chat.
And I'd like to say I've been using Feedback, his plugin, a little bit more recently, and it's fantastic. It does do the job, as he says, out the can. Just to fit quickly, we got a webinar on the 4th of August with another member of the panel, a regular member, and that's Chris Badgett. We're going to be talking about all things learning management systems, how to get your course up and running for $99, and other things. It's going to be a feast of information. So if that sounds interesting, you can go to the WP-Tonic website. There's a button in the main menu that says free webinar, and you just give some quick information, and you'll be told periodically when the webinar is coming up, and that's on the 4th of August, Tuesday the 4th of August at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Thank you, panel. Thank you, audience. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.